The evening rush had just begun in the busy electronics market, the kind of place filled with glowing signboards, the smell of warm wires, and the continuous chatter of people bargaining over gadgets. Among the crowd, a man with tired eyes and worn-out clothes slowly stepped inside a bright phone shop. His shoes were dusty, his shoulders slightly bent, and his hands nervously pressed together as if he was preparing himself for something difficult. He looked completely out of place among the shiny shelves filled with expensive smartphones. From the moment he entered, the shopkeeper barely glanced at him, assuming he wasn't the kind of customer who could afford anything new. But what the shopkeeper didn't know was that the man was carrying a weight far heavier than anyone could see, a weight that had pushed him to swallow his pride and come here today. If you believe kindness and second chances can change a life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. The man took a few hesitant steps toward the counter, scanning the glowing displays of polished phones that he knew were far beyond his reach. His heart beat heavier with every passing second. He wasn't here to buy anything fancy. He wasn't here for himself. He was here because his world, his son, needed something urgently, something he could not give without help. Yet, the moment he looked up at the shopkeeper, he saw a faint smirk forming, the kind of expression people often give when they assume someone is wasting their time. The father swallowed hard, gathering the courage he had rehearsed for days. All he wanted was a simple used phone, nothing more, nothing less. The shopkeeper finally asked what he wanted, his tone sharp and uninterested, already judging the man's faded clothes and anxious posture. The father quietly asked if there was any old, used, or damaged phone available, something he could buy cheaply, something still able to run basic apps. The shopkeeper let out a small, mocking laugh, not even trying to hide it. His voice carried across the room as he repeated the man's request loudly, making the workers around him chuckle as well. The father's face flushed with embarrassment, but he did not walk away. He could not. The shopkeeper shook his head and joked that this wasn't a scrap shop and suggested the man try somewhere else. But the father stayed still, breathing deeply, trying to hold his dignity together despite the humiliation. His eyes lowered for a moment, but then, with trembling courage, he lifted them again. The truth he carried was heavier than the laughter surrounding him, a truth so painful and so powerful that it would silence the entire room. The man finally spoke softly, but with a weight that pierced through the noise of the shop. He said he didn't care if the phone was old or cracked or slow. He didn't care if it looked ugly or outdated. He only needed it to work well enough for his son to attend his online classes. He explained that his little boy had been borrowing devices from neighbors, often missing lessons because the phone wasn't always available. The father confessed he had been saving every little coin for months, skipping meals, walking instead of taking the bus, and doing extra labor late into the night. Today was the first time he had enough courage and enough money to even ask if he could buy a used phone. As the father spoke, the laughter in the shop died instantly. The smirks faded. The room grew quiet, almost uncomfortably still. The shopkeeper stared at him stunned, suddenly realizing the man was not here to waste anyone's time. He was here because his son deserved a chance, a future, an education that he himself never had. And he was willing to go through humiliation to give his child just one simple device. Something most people replaced every year without a thought. The father continued speaking, sharing how his son, despite all the challenges, was one of the brightest students in his school, how he dreamed of becoming an engineer someday, how his teachers kept saying he had a spark in him, a rare dedication for a boy his age, but the world didn't care about dreams without resources. The boy needed a phone for assignments, online classes, and exams. And this father, this tired, humble man had been fighting alone against circumstances that were far bigger than him. By now, even the youngest sales assistant in the shop felt a sting of shame. The shopkeeper, who had laughed first, now felt the weight of guilt pressing heavily on him. He looked at the father, realizing that he had mocked a man who was doing everything a parent should do, sacrificing, struggling, enduring just to keep his child's future alive. A deep silence fell across the shop as the father gently opened his fist and placed a small bundle of money on the counter. The notes were crumpled, uneven, and worn, some old enough to be almost tearing at the edges. But they were real. They were honest. They were a father's hard-earned sacrifice. He softly said this was all he had managed to save, and if it wasn't enough, he understood. He would keep saving. He would keep trying. Because his son's hope was more important than his own comfort. The shopkeeper stared at the money, then at the man, then back at the money again. Something shifted inside him, something human, something that had been buried under years of business, profit, and routine. Without saying a word, he walked to the glass shelf behind him and picked up a box, not a used phone, but one of the latest models, a new, sealed, high-quality smartphone. He brought it to the counter and placed it gently in front of the father. The man stepped back in confusion, thinking there had been some mistake. But the shopkeeper's voice was slow and sincere as he said that the phone was for his son, not used, not old, not broken, a brand new one. The father froze, unable to understand what was happening. The shopkeeper explained that no child's education should suffer, and no parent should ever be humiliated for trying to give their child a better future. He pushed the phone toward the father and refused to take the man's hard-earned money. Instead, he placed the bundle back into the father's hands with a reassuring gesture. Tears gathered in the father's eyes as he looked at the phone, almost afraid to touch it. His hands trembled as he held it, feeling its smooth surface, realizing it was something he could never have afforded. His voice cracked as he thanked the shopkeeper again and again, but the seller shook his head, saying the father had taught him something important today, that a parent's love and sacrifice are priceless. The workers in the shop stood silently, their earlier laughter now replaced with admiration and regret. Some even wiped tears from their eyes as they watched the father carefully place the phone in the small cloth bag he carried. He held it close, as if holding his son's future. As the father walked out of the shop, his steps were lighter, his shoulders straighter, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The world hadn't always been kind to him, but today, just for a moment, it had shown him a piece of goodness he would never forget. He stepped back into the busy market, surrounded by noise and rushing people. But for him, everything felt different, brighter, softer, filled with hope. He imagined the look on his son's face when he gave him the phone. He imagined the excitement in the boy's eyes, the renewed confidence, the dreams that would now feel reachable. And with every step he took, the father silently prayed for the man who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Later that night, when he reached home and handed the phone to his son, the child froze in disbelief. His little hands shook as he held it close to his chest. The father wiped his tears and told him to study hard, to make something out of his life, to build a future where he would never have to feel small the way his father had felt today. The boy promised he would, and he meant every word. In that tiny, dimly lit home, filled with love and sacrifice, a dream was reborn. A future was rewritten. A life was changed forever, not by money, but by kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to support more stories like this. Special request: before you go, comment below. Kindness changes lives.